All right, so a couple of days ago when I gave you guys that initial breaking report on the Al-Ali hospital in Gaza that was bombed, presumably killing hundreds and hundreds of Palestinian civilians, we were working with a very, very limited information, essentially just the breaking reports that were coming from on the ground. And so, I'm obviously always trying to be as responsible as I possibly can on this channel, give you guys as accurate information as I possibly can. And so I didn't want to make any firm judgments or declarative statements one way or another, but just give you guys the broader context of what exactly is happening. Now, with that being said, in the last couple of days, we have gotten a lot more evidence that has emerged, and obviously we have gotten very strong denials from both the Hamas/PIJ Palestinian side and also from the Israeli side. And so there's so much to get into here. Again, I'm not going to make a 100% definitive judgment for you guys, but I'm just going to lay out the entire context and the most up-to-date sort of lightly investigations, I guess you could say, or light investigations, because we still don't have people on the ground who are able to confirm a lot of this or to do a real forensic analysis, but I'll just lay this out for you guys and let you make your own conclusions. So here first, just to start us off, I want to give you guys a visual of what it actually looked like on the ground. So I'm not going to say that this is good news, but I'll say that it is probably less bad than the initial reports had made it out to be. So, I mean, my impression from some of the initial reports was that the entire hospital infrastructure had been either severely damaged or entirely destroyed, and it looks like, I mean, this is basically the main hospital complex back here. Obviously, it's still standing. On top of that, you also had a lot of destruction there. You had destruction here to this car park where it looks like was the main center point of where this strike actually landed, and you have some surrounding destruction here to the buildings, but the reason why I say that it could potentially be less bad than the initial reports is, we obviously don't have the 100% confirmation of the casualty numbers, the amount of people who died. But, if this is the size of the strike, if this is the destruction from the strike, then I guess we can kind of just cross our fingers and hope that it wasn't the higher estimates of like 500 to 800 or even over 1,000 people that ended up dying in this strike, still absolutely catastrophic. But this is what it looked like on the ground. I mean, you can see sort of here would be roughly the entry point for whatever it was, a rocket, a missile, whatever you want to call it, and even some of the cars that are surrounding here are still somewhat intact. And so I want to point out again that one of the reasons why the people here, or why there could have been so many civilian casualties as a part of this strike that doesn't look like it's the same scale as other massive Israeli strikes that level entire, blocks and everything like that. Part of the reason why there could be so many civilian casualties in this is that people were taking refuge at this hospital. I mean, I think it was a Baptist hospital, and so a lot of people figured this is going to be one of the only places in Gaza that could potentially be safe from any airstrikes, and obviously they were wrong. Unfortunately, it seems like it's kind of just open season on the Gaza Strip right now, and so it looks like you had a lot of people who were condensed into this sort of parking lot and adjacent area that could have gotten caught up in this. So that's what it actually looked like, some of the first daylight pictures that we have gotten from on the ground. Now, with that being said, I want to get to this Channel 4 investigation that they put out here, and I think that this was probably the most reasonable one that I've seen at least come across my timeline. Now, again, what this comes down to is that we're going to need third-party investigators to actually go in on the ground, do forensic analysis, and they'll be able to point to an actual, definitive conclusion from this, whether it was, as Israel claims, a PIJ rocket or a Hamas rocket that was a misfire, or whether it was actually an Israeli airstrike. We should be able to find the accurate information if we can get people on the ground to do, a real investigation. But this seems like it's the best analysis that I've seen floating around. So let's just go ahead and watch our way through this.
Last night, as every night, news agency cameras locked off in Gaza to record the explosions. At 10 to 7, they pick up what appears to be a rocket above Gaza, apparently exploding in mid-air. Shortly after, 2 explosions. The second, believed to be in the hospital car park, causes a large and immediate fire. There's no proof that the mid-air and ground explosions are necessarily linked. We spoke to one eyewitness.
I live very near to the hospital, and we have seen, the neighboring area have seen the bombs dropping on the hospital. The explosion was so massive and so huge, and the mountain fire rising up into the sky was so horrible. We instantly knew that this is the Ahli Arab Hospital. It's the Baptist hospital, the oldest Christian hospital in Gaza Strip.
Dr. Mohammed Al-Naka said there was no warning and about 3,000 people were sheltering here. He said, "We don't know what it was, but we know what it can do after it targeted children who were cut to pieces." Gaza's Hamas-controlled health ministry says 471 people were killed. If so, that's by far the worst single loss of life for Palestinians in all the long wars with Israel.
I also want to point out that, I've looked at some of the statistics over the last couple of days on how much damage misfired Hamas or PIJ rockets typically do, if that is what this ends up being. And it's just not even remotely comparable, right? I mean, they're claiming over 400 people died as a result of this attack. As that doctor was just pointing out there, 3,000 people were sheltering there. So that is entirely possible. Again, that's not a independently confirmed number. But I mean, obviously the video here that they have blurred out, I saw the uncensored version of this, and it's just, it's horrific. I mean, one of the worst things that I've ever seen in my life, just body parts, in pieces, children, just innocent people who were torn to shreds by this attack. And so again, the point that I want to make there is just that, you can look at data and, like, for example, from a period of 2004 to 2014, which granted was, over a decade ago at this point, but just during that decade from 04 to 14, the entire amount of casualties from misfired Hamas rockets or rockets fired by Hamas in general, okay, was about less than 50. And that includes, Israeli civilians that were killed, IDF people who were killed, Palestinians who were killed. And so essentially the claim being made by Israel here is that this one misfired PIJ or Hamas rocket ended up killing what? Like 10 times the amount than were killed during the entirety of a decade of rockets that were being fired? That seems kind of wild to me, okay? But they continue here with this investigation.
Doctors held a press conference standing in the middle of a makeshift mortuary. It is clear scores of people at least were killed. Moreover, the Archbishop of Canterbury has said the hospital was attacked at the weekend, at least 4 civilians injured. And on Sunday, the Israelis phoned up telling everybody to evacuate.
Okay, that's another very important piece of evidence there, right? Now, this is just, again, giving broader context, but I've seen so many people who are fervently buying into the Israeli line or the Israeli narrative that they're trying to push right now, and a lot of them are saying things like, Israel would never bomb a hospital, and it's like, they not only have already bombed dozens and dozens of hospitals during just this offensive, not to mention the bombings of hospitals during previous offensive into Gaza, and other health facilities, UN facilities, ambulances, all the rest of that, right? As if the idea that they're above bombing, healthcare is completely absurd, and they've even given justifications in the past for bombing hospital infrastructure. So that part of it is completely wild to me. But not only have they bombed other healthcare facilities, they bombed this specific hospital 2 times, okay, 2 separate times. And we're going to get to more evidence that was laid out by Hamas, where it looks like, again, is that archbishop or whatever there that we just saw, that Israel was giving a warning that they were potentially going to attack this hospital and trying to get people to evacuate from this hospital. So, I mean, again, if I was just looking at the evidence on the ground and looking at the actual destruction and the mortar site and how big that the actual rocket itself was, I probably would be leaning more towards, okay, this definitely could have been a misfired PIJ rocket. But then we have all of this other context surrounding it where it's like, you already bombed this specific hospital multiple times at a much smaller scale and apparently gave warnings to the people who are behind running this hospital to evacuate it, okay? And then what are we supposed to take from that? That you would never have in a million years bombed this hospital? I mean, you kind of openly said that you may have. So they continue here.
Gaza today, damage caused by an Israeli airstrike. Concrete buildings pancaked, structural collapse over a wide area, splash marks of shrapnel. Large craters are usual if the missile hits open ground as opposed to a building, like a car park. This is what you see at the hospital today. Small craters you'd expect from a mortar strike or artillery round, not a missile. Surrounding buildings have only superficial damage, not structural collapse. Some of the windows of an adjoining church remain intact. This makes a ground-detonating Israeli missile strike unlikely, but it doesn't rule out an airburst munition, which could cause major loss of life, but would produce far less structural damage. So what then of Israel's explanation? Sensing a major problem, they worked through the night to get their version out. Press conference first thing.
Good morning, everybody.
This is where we just get to the ridiculous portion of this, which is that, okay, if we buy the line that this was a misfired PIJ rocket or Hamas rocket, right? If we buy into that line, then why is Israel coming out and providing completely faulty and contradicting evidence to the world right now? Why would you lie about some of the evidence if you actually didn't do it? I mean, that's something else that just sticks in my brain and makes absolutely no goddamn sense whatsoever. Now, as you pointed out just a couple minutes ago or a couple seconds ago there, you know, it looks like this could have been something like a mortar or a smaller rocket that Hamas and the PIJ do use. But it also could have been, there's no ruling out, that it also could have been some sort of like an airburst attack from Israel as well, which is essentially, and I'm no obviously like weapons expert or anything like that, but from what I've read, you know, it's sort of something that explodes right before it hits the ground, and so you wouldn't have that massive crater as we saw from some of the other strikes. So, I mean, again, it's kind of up in the air unless we get an actual independent analysis done by a third party, but look at this evidence that Israel was trying to claim was basically exonerating them.
Conclusion, a misfiring Islamic Jihad rocket caused it all.
According to our intelligence, Hamas checked the reports, understood it was an Islamic Jihad rocket that had misfired, and decided to launch a global media campaign to hide what really happened.
They present what they say is two Hamas operatives talking about the attack.
بس بقول لك الأول مرة بنشوف الصاروخ زي هيك والشظايا هذه فبقول لك تبع الجهاد الصواريخ الجهاد الإسلامي.
Hamas call this an obvious fabrication. Two independent Arab journalists told us the same thing because of the language, accent, dialect, syntax and tone, none of which is, they say, credible.
Yeah, and I mean, I've seen that from so many other people who are native Arabic speakers. I mean, obviously, again, there's no way for me to know that. I don't speak Arabic. I don't know what the accent in Gaza versus, you know, other surrounding places sounds like and would be able to tell the difference. But based on what I've seen from everybody that I know that speaks Arabic and also the independent experts that they're citing here, it seems like Israel may have just completely fabricated this supposed call between two militants in Gaza, where, I mean, even if you just read the text on the bottom of the screen, and they don't go through the entire clip here in this video, I don't think, but when you're reading it, it's almost like comical. I mean, it's like they're calling each other on the phone, which, by the way, they usually use alternative forms of communication where they're not just like on an open line that can be tapped by Israel, right? But apparently Israel, after not seeing the October 7th, you know, attack by Hamas into southern Israel coming, even though it may have been planned for months, if not years, now they have access to like this very high quality phone call that took place between Hamas operatives where they're literally going back and forth and they're like, yep, it looks like this was a, you know, Palestinian rocket, definitely not an Israeli rocket. Nobody would ever, you know, nobody should ever, you know, believe that this was an Israeli rocket or something like that. And it's just like, really? I mean, it just seems like so ridiculous and farcical at its face. And again, I've seen so many people who do speak Arabic, who are from Gaza, who have said that this does not sound like what a Gaza accent sounds and that the Arabic is faulty and all the other things that they just pointed out there. But they continue here.
Equally, Israel claims the Islamic Jihad failed missile was fired from here, a cemetery very close to the hospital. But look again at the video of the event. The trajectory of the missile doesn't line up with that location. Too high, too horizontal.
And also, this was one of the main videos that Israel was pushing around from this live stream on Al Jazeera to say it was 100% a PIJ or a Hamas rocket here. So it looks like that doesn't even technically line up with the trajectory that it would have been if it was fired from the place that they initially said it was.
Confusingly, the Israelis' presentation also says the missile was fired from a location down in the southwest. It can't be both. Islamic Jihad say it was an Israeli missile and they have the warhead to prove it, but they haven't produced it.
I wanted to be here today.
Okay, So that's essentially the extent of what we know right now. Of course, we had Joe Biden, as I talked about yesterday, going to visit Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu after a lot of the other surrounding countries like in Jordan and Egypt and the Palestinian, leader Mahmoud Abbas all canceled on him while he was supposed to go do this roundabout sort of thing. And he basically just completely bought into Benjamin Netanyahu's line, the Israeli government's line, that, oh, it looks like this wasn't Israel that conducted this strike. But I mean, again, there's no way to know, conclusively 100% one way or another, but that's basically what we know so far. Again, I find it incredibly suspicious that we have all of this evidence that Israel's putting out to say definitively this was not our rocket, and then they're just constantly putting out like misinformation or easily disprovable things. I mean, this was another one that I saw happen like almost live on my Twitter feed. You had the official government of Israel account. They come out with this statement. They say from our analysis and everything and from our intelligence gathering that this is what happened, and they show like multiple different videos down here, and then some people pointed out, hey, the markings on this video and the timestamps don't line up for when the hospital was struck, and then they deleted the videos. They literally, there's a function on Twitter where you can edit your tweet, and you can go look this up. I mean, I still think it's posted on their official Twitter account, and they removed the videos from this tweet. And it's like, you guys are supposed to be this like highly advanced, highly sophisticated military apparatus, and your official account is tweeting this out in the midst of all of this misinformation and other information that we've been getting from on the ground, and you're just posting videos that are completely, contradictory to the actual claim that you're trying to make in your own self-defense. Okay, we also had somebody who has, very close ties with the government of Israel, this guy, Hananya Naftali, who initially made this statement, later deleted it after the fact very quickly, but this was right after the hospital was struck. He said, breaking, Israeli Air Force struck a Hamas terrorist base inside a hospital in Gaza. A multiple number of terrorists are dead. It's heartbreaking that Hamas is launching rockets from hospitals, mosques, schools, and using civilians as human shields. So he made this claim. He took credit for it. He said, oh, the Israeli government just did this. Oh, it's unfortunate that the civilians were caught up in it because they were being used as human shields by Hamas, but we struck the hospital. Now, this guy I don't think he works directly for the Israeli government, but he's very close buddies with guys like Benjamin Netanyahu, and frequently he does make statements that are like in tandem with the Israeli government. And so this is the kind of thing that he was tweeting out. And it was super ironic because, again, this was one of the guys who I think was, later in that the same day that he posted and then deleted this, was coming out and saying like, Israel doesn't strike hospitals, guys. Like that's not what we do, right? We're a democracy. We are the most moral army in the world. We don't do that kind of thing. And it's like, you literally just tweeted this out and tried to claim as if that's what happened. We also had here, again, it's pointed out by Kenneth Roth, that Le Monde is reporting that the Al-Ahli hospital was already damaged by Israeli bombing on October 14th and on October 15th, the days before this massive strike. Quote, the Israeli army had called the hospital's director. The Israeli army had called the hospital's director to tell him that those two shots were warnings to evacuate. What are we supposed to take from this? Okay, maybe you could say it was an incredible coincidence. Yes, Israel bombed this hospital multiple times days before this, called them on the phone, warned them to evacuate, but then it didn't happen to be their airstrike this time, and just so happens that at the same exact time, we had some rockets that were fired by the PIJ, and they misfired and fell directly on this hospital that Israel was already warning to evacuate. I mean, maybe you could make that argument. I don't know. I mean, again, if I had not seen all of the context surrounding this and things like this, or the misinformation or the changing information that has come out from the Israeli government, and I were to just look at the missile strike itself on the ground and those daylight pictures we started with in this video, I would be much more likely to lean towards, okay, believing maybe this was a misfire. I mean, misfires happen all the time. Maybe it was just extremely unlucky. It landed smack dab in the middle of where, a couple thousand, refugees were sitting, and, maybe that's what happened. But then we have all of this other context that's adding onto it, and I'm like, hang on a second, this makes no fucking sense, right? And again, it's also important to point out, part of the reason why there were so many people in that densely packed area is because they were refugees, is because they were sheltering. They had nowhere else to go other than sitting in this Baptist, this Baptist affiliated hospital parking lot in order to try to seek refuge, because there's nowhere else in Gaza that's safe for them to be, right? And obviously this wasn't safe either, but that also needs to be pointed out here, right? And I don't want all of this debate around whether it was Israel, whether it was Hamas or the PIJ that ended up firing this rocket and killing all of these people. I don't want it to distract from the fact of all of the other destruction that is currently happening in Gaza. A full-blown siege, the genocidal language of Israeli politicians and US politicians for that matter. I mean, again, we've had thousands of people who were killed. Put this one strike, out of the picture for now. We've already had thousands of people killed, over 1,000 children dead. okay? Over 1 million people displaced, right? No adequate access to food or drinking water or electricity. The hospitals are running dry. I mean, this is like one of the worst humanitarian situations on the face of the planet. And it does seem almost like a lot of people want us to continue focusing and having this debate about the technical side and the weapons aspect of who was technically responsible for the bombing of this hospital. And then in the meantime, we're having all of this other destruction that's happening around the Gaza Strip as we speak. Okay, just a couple other things I wanted to point out to give more context. Hospitals in Gaza are struggling to save people even as the IDF tells them to evacuate. So again, they've told dozens of hospitals to evacuate, which is number one, impossible. Number two, completely ridiculous and a criminal thing to ask people to do. But also, I mean, it gives you an indication. Why are you asking hospitals to evacuate if you don't plan on attacking them, right? We also had this that happened again in the last couple of days as we were all arguing about this hospital strike. Dozens killed as Israeli strike hit southern Gaza refugee areas. Southern Gaza, the place that the Israeli military told the people in North Gaza to flee to. Now we've seen them strike caravans of people who are trying to flee south. Now we've seen them strike inside Gaza plenty of times. I've heard testimony from people in southern Gaza right now who came from the north as Israel told them to do. And they say there's no difference. There's no fucking difference between the intense bombing campaign in the north versus the south. I mean, it's the same shit. There's nowhere that is safe in the Gaza Strip right now. So all of that ploy about, oh, go to the south and you'll be safer there, it was bullshit from the beginning. Again, more context here from the Huffington Post. Israeli president suggests that civilians in Gaza are legitimate targets. This was Isaac Herzog. He said, it is an entire nation out there that is responsible. It is not true, this rhetoric about civilians not being aware or involved. It's absolutely not true. They could have risen up. They could have fought against that evil regime which took over Gaza. So, I mean, again, we've seen this from plenty other Israeli politicians as well. This is the president. This is the president of Israel. Okay, Isaac Herzog, who's saying there are no civilians in Gaza. We consider everybody to be a legitimate target. Why? Because you could have overthrown your government, right? I mean, I'm not even kidding. This is the exact logic that terrorists use. Okay, one for one. You could say the exact same thing about Hamas's recent attack into southern Israel. You could say, well, those Israeli civilians supported the Benjamin Netanyahu government that has been displacing Palestinians in the West Bank. The IDF under him that has been allowing, settler terrorism in the West Bank. Okay, that has been, continuing this siege on the Gaza Strip. So because they elected the government of Benjamin Netanyahu, therefore there is no such thing as innocent civilians. They're all legitimate targets. It's the same logic that Hamas used to do the attack into Israel. And they see no hypocrisy in this whatsoever. They see no contradiction. It's the same exact logic. It's insanity. It's utter insanity. We also had this here, posted by the official Israeli Prime Minister account. Now, they deleted this after they got, quote tweeted into oblivion. But this is the kind of rhetoric they're using, guys. If this isn't genocidal, I don't know what is. This is a struggle between the children of light and the children of darkness, between humanity and the law of the jungle. Okay? I'll let you guys read into that as you want to. The children of light versus the children of darkness, between humanity and the law of the jungle. This is how they see this. This was tweeted from the official account of the Israeli Prime Minister. I also wanted to show you guys this. This isn't something I had, to get into detail yet. But I think that this is important historical context as well, and then I'll wrap up this video. So I've talked a lot about some of the insane far-right people that are currently in the Benjamin Netanyahu coalition, guys like Itamar Ben-Gvir, and also guys like this guy, Bezalel Smotrich, who is a finance minister, but also has more of a deeper aspect and role in terms of the Israeli military apparatus or the settler project, the colonial project of the government of Israel. And so this guy's a very key player in the Benjamin Netanyahu government. And I think that this is important, okay? This is from Haaretz, all right? One of the main newspapers or papers of record inside Israel. Right-wing Israeli lawmakers' plan to coerce Palestinian departure is nothing but a fantasy, despicable and impossible to describe without using the word apartheid. Bezalel Smotrich's plan really is a distraction. So this was from 2017. Now this guy, again, is in a high position of power in the Benjamin Netanyahu government. The plan for the territories proposed by MK, which I'm guessing is member of the Knesset, Bezalel Smotrich, is despicable, but it is also merely an intentional distraction. The semantics, as well as the content of the fantasy that Smotrich surely wants to call visionary, are disgraceful. Its main planks are the annexation of the West Bank, the voluntary expulsion of Palestinians who have not given up on their national aspirations. Obviously calling this voluntary expulsion is completely absurd. It's not voluntary, right? but voluntary expulsion of Palestinians who have not given up their national aspirations or aspirations for a statehood, and the establishment of cantons for the remainder who will live comfortable lives devoid of rights or be dealt with by security forces. Okay, so you understand what he's offering here to the Palestinian people. One of the most powerful people within Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition, which, by the way, he's formed this most recent coalition to save his own ass because he's also facing potential charges inside Israel and could end up behind jail bars if he wasn't the current prime minister. But you understand what he's proposing there? What his overall plan or his view on the so-called Israeli-Palestinian conflict is here? He's saying, we're going to annex all of your territory. You can leave willingly, okay? Option number one is you either submit to a total apartheid where you have no human rights, okay, under Israeli rule of the entirety of the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. That's option number one, apartheid. Option number two is expulsion. You can leave. You can go to a different country, right? Ethnic cleansing is what that is. Or number three is genocide. Okay, that's what it's genocidal. That's what he's offering. He's saying we can go in and we can go to war and kill everybody who does not submit to option number one or two. This is the finance minister of the government of Israel. And I have people arguing with me, online or otherwise, even in my real life, as if this is a reasonable government that's in power in Israel. This is one of the most bloodthirsty and genocidal governments on the face of the planet right now. These are the kinds of things that they've been talking about for years. And now they're launching this offensive with a majority of Americans supporting it, with obviously a vast, vast majority of the American government supporting it. Joe Biden giving them essentially a green light to do whatever they want. He's tapered in some, sprinkled in some language of, well, be a little bit wary. After 9/11, we made some mistakes here and there as the United States, be a little bit wary. But he's not pressuring them for a ceasefire. Okay, he is allowing them to do this. And we've seen the language from all of these Israeli politicians. It is genocidal. They want an ethnic cleansing. They want the utter destruction of Gaza. That's what they want. And that is what my tax dollars, your tax dollars, if you live here in the United States with me, that's what it's going to fund. And they're currently weighing passing another aid package to Israel on top of the $3.8 billion we already give them on an annual basis that we've been giving to them for years and years and years. They want to give them more aid, more weapons, more support diplomatically, and cover. I showed you guys just the other day, the United States of America vetoed a resolution at the United Nations Security Council. We're the only country to veto it, okay, that was calling for a ceasefire to be able to deliver humanitarian aid to Gaza. This is what our government's doing right now. So anybody, I think, in my opinion at least, that is not currently aggressively trying to pressure for a ceasefire is going to have a monumental, unfathomable amount of blood on their hands at the end of this.
Everyone is saying good politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me. Everyone is saying